All right, we all good to rumble?
Oh, I think so. So what do you really want hearing this?
You've been in the regenerative space for a long time, yeah?
A lifetime?
A lifetime of regenerative.
Almost a lifetime.
So,
And how far do you want to go? Because I've lived through, and I tell a lot of people this, I have lived through and seen the coming of some of it was on the go beforehand, but basically I've seen the coming of the major use of DDT, 2,4-D, and been involved with some of that, and urea on the downs. Some of the earliest urea ever put on the downs, I was working for other people that were doing it. So I've been involved with all of that, and I've been involved with agriculture more or less all my life. And I grew up with the wheat and sheep and cattle and irrigation and loose and hay and every other aspect of farming almost that you want to think about. So I've worked in earth moving and that for a few years as well, and then taught myself engineering and carried on from there, and that got introduced to minerals back in the 60s, and nothing was done. There's a whole family reasons for that, we won't go there. And then in the late 80s, I had a cousin who was always involved with what they would call regen farming today, where he was doing it simply with crop rotation, not so much multi-species and that, but then in the 1960s I remember him planting Dolichos with the other crop and also on its own, and we used to dig them up, and we've seen nitrogen nodules that big on Dolichos lab stalks and that, and I was always pretty sold on that. And then back in around about 1988 or 89, just before the drought really kicked in, I called in to see him one day outside Dalby, and we had a cup of tea, and he said, come on, we'll go and have a look at the wheat. We did that, and what do we see? Wheat that's about 3 foot high, roughly, and every head's about a good 6 inches long or more, and every head's filling 3 rows and some's filling 4. And then you come home and you look at your own wheat, and we didn't use a lot of chemicals, and we did have a lot of rotation, but not perhaps like we could have done. But different variety admittedly, but it's this high, it's got heads this long on it, and it's filling 2 rows. Tell me who's going to make the money.
So what was the difference?
The difference was because of what he was doing versus what we were doing. You know, we weren't really growing so much. We were doing a bit of soya bean and that, but we weren't doing rotation with things like Dolichos and other things and pigeon peas and those sorts of things that he was doing. And it just makes a huge difference to the job, even though small amount. And I knew then that beyond all doubt where it was wrong. And round about the same time I got introduced to the use of rock dust, and while there's things to learn about that too, it's not quite as simple as people think it is. In many respects it is simple. And we were putting rock dust on the farm, and they were saying, oh, you just put rock dust on, don't need nothing else. That is not necessarily correct, because you need to look at a soil analysis, and you need to look at an analysis of the product you're putting on, and whatever is still low, you must add. Some people today say, and they're not entirely wrong either, oh, well, you just do multi-species cropping, but sometimes even that is not enough on its own. You must look at that mineral balance, because that is the first 2 keys to all of this. Number 1 is minerals, number 2 is the biology, because it's the biology that take those minerals and make them available to the plant in a form the plant can utilise. It's the same with our gut and the animal's gut. It's the biology in our gut, and if it's not there to start with, then it ain't going to happen the way it should. And that it all comes down to 2 words that I'm famous with some people for saying years ago: balance and interaction of the whole job. So we need our minerals, we need our biology, we need the diversity of crops, we need all of these things. It all comes down to one, because there's a law of nature, and that is God's law. And that's not being a religious nut or Mother Nature, if anybody can't accept that, but it's God as far as I'm concerned. You either try and work within those laws or you work outside them. Conventional agriculture for most of my life has been working outside of it. And what is the end result? We got more soil erosion than ever. We got more ill health in the country. And that implies ill health in the soil, ill health in our animals, and ill health in the people. Because this is the price we pay. Because all of this stuff with the way they're farming then becomes deficient. Because while they're all essential elements, the conventional farming, NPK and Roundup theory just does not work. While the NPK is all essential nutrients, they're only a part of the picture. What about the calcium? What about the boron? What about the sulfur, the molybdenum, the manganese, the cobalt, the potassium, the zinc, etc., all the different elements across the board? They're all there for a reason, and they all play their part. So if we're just going to do one thing here and think that's it, it's not, because you've got to look at the whole. I see a lot of people and talk with a lot of people, they'll get halfway around the picture or 3/4 of the way sometimes. But that's it, but they never go the whole hog. It's got to be that whole piece. Without that, it'll never work properly. And when you do, it doesn't mean you can't and won't have challenges, but the end result, like I know of livestock, where simply by putting minerals on their soil, and I know the man and the property in person, I've been on it, they took their carcass yield from 53 to 57 and then to 61%. That's big, but on top of that, to take the same beast at the same age and weight, growing out to the same approximate weight, finished off and out the gate, their time to do that dropped from 15 months average to 11 months average, and he'd been doing that for over 20 years. And then they say, oh, we'll have to do more research. I don't need their flaming research if I can do that, and that's just fact of life. Then on the other side, I've got another friend who does things, although he didn't learn it from me. Basically, he does things pretty much the way I reckon they should be done, and he took tomato yield phenomenal from 130 tonne a week off a given area to 450 tonne a week with literally no disease and no insect attack. So again, they say it can't be done, but the other side of the coin we got is, and I know this won't make me any friends, some people don't like me for it, but all this modern day plant breeding is no damn good. And I've seen it. 2 varieties of oats, an old variety and a more modern variety that came out back in the 90s, sowed in the same paddock, half a paddock of each, put the livestock in there, and they'll eat the one variety out, the old variety, they pick around in the other, but if they go into it, then come out, and after they ate the old variety out, then they'd eat it because the other's eaten out. But until then, no, they wanted the old one. Why? Because animals aren't stupid. They know where the good stuff is, and they will seek it out. And that's just fact of life, and it's the same across the board. Had a little snippet sent to me recently from some people that came apparently from Purdue University in America, where they're finding now that modern day tomatoes, for instance, won't utilise the biology in the soil like the old varieties. And we become so deficient. We got things like seedless melons, lemons, grapes, limes. We all think that that's, how great, we got no seed. Yeah, well, if you got no seed, it usually means you've got no manganese in the equation. Now, if memory serves me correctly, there's something like 42 different enzymes you can't manufacture if you don't have manganese in the equation. So we do one thing here, we create a whole chain reaction that's all part of the system, and it's missing. That in itself guarantees ill health. I had another guy I was a bit friendly with years ago in Victoria who had some animals, sheep namely, and they got Yohn's disease. And of course you're supposed to vaccinate for that and all the rest of their garbage and that, but I don't know what individual minerals he gave them, but he gave his sheep minerals and they all just got better. So while it's easy to talk about, it's another thing to go out and do it right. This is how it is. This is the principle. And minerals are number one in the equation. Biology is number two, but then the two got to become one. Without that, they're firing and both working together as one, it just doesn't happen.
Now, on that, because I've been sitting here very patiently waiting to ask David a question, I have, as you are well aware now, one of the most amazing guys on the planet in the back of the ute, and I'm very privileged, David, that you've been able to join me. And I would like to just ask you a question, if I may.
Yep.
And that is, would you be able to explain who the Meterman is?
Well, the Meterman, that name came about because I was at a show once with some of the meters, which I got introduced to them in the 90s, early 90s, and it's been a progression. The bricks meter was number one. I was told that the low numbers were bad and high numbers were good, and that was all I knew. I had no books. I didn't know people like my good friends of today, Dr. Arden Anderson, Dr. Furr. He wrote Anatomy of Life and Energy and a number of other books. And then another good friend, Dr. Phil Wheeler from America. Phil wrote Non-Toxic Farming Handbook, and I got introduced to many others as well. The work of Dan Scow. He wrote Mainline Farming for Century 21. That was the first book I ever read on all this. And once I read that, I knew then that the bricks meter, for instance, was part of where the job was going to go, would go, and needed to go. I just knew it in my heart. And of course, I'm one of those people that if people don't agree with me or say I'm wrong, I don't care. If I feel in my heart it's right, I will go down that trail, and that is exactly what I've done.
Now, from my perspective, I would like to acknowledge your quality of products as well. Really, there's nowhere else, especially in Australia, that you can buy the quality that David offers. Just talk about that for a moment.
Well, I tried some of the gear we have, like the penetrometers and that. We make them ourselves. The bricks meters, yes, there's others out there that are probably just as good, but I don't deviate. I've dealt with the same people since 1993, and that's it. And I have select people that I tend to deal with. There's other good people out there, no doubt, but I like the people I operate with because I know that if I have a problem, they can give me some backup as far as anything that I buy and on-sell to them. And that, but then the penetrometers, we make them ourselves, and the water tubes and all that. I make all that because I'm also a self-taught fitter and turner and what have you, and I've been welding and making stuff for many years.
And when you deal with the Meterman, you will also encounter such good quality of service as well. We were just talking about that before. David loves to have a yarn and make sure that you're on the right track and cross any T's and dot any I's that might be missing.
Yep, just got to realise I don't know it all, but what I do know, once I know something's correct, I stand on that, and I don't care who likes it and who don't. I make no bones about that for anybody. Because there, as I said earlier, there is a law of nature. We either try and work within it or we work against it. And conventional agriculture for many years, fortunately there is a change going on, but for many years it has worked against the laws of nature, and that just doesn't work. I've personally experienced that. 21 years ago I got sick from chemicals. We did the last 10 years, by the way, on the farm until the end of from 1990 till 1999 we did it organically. And that, but unfortunately, because of things I've done and worked with other people in past life and that, I've had a high exposure to a lot of chemicals, and at the end of 99 I got very, very sick and I couldn't work, and I'm alive today thanks to God and alternative medicine, and indeed I also say no bloody thanks to the medical fraternity, and I make no bones about that either. And that's how I'm very mindful of all this, and it's been a great journey ever since. And some of the other people I've been involved with is people like Neil Kenzie. He wrote Hands on Agronomy. He's one of the last of William Albrecht's students. Albrecht proved all his work beyond doubt. And then you got the late Kerry Reams, a brilliant, brilliant man. I follow a lot of his teachings and Albrecht's teachings. They're the two main things I follow with all of this today, apart from my own personal experience. And with the use of, I think we touched on rock dust before, did we, a bit? With rock dust. You know, I've seen even rock dust, in spite of what I said earlier, make a have an interesting outcome. I've seen some soil outside Toowoomba here where a man who unfortunately has passed on now, but he put rock dust on an area. It was a very dry year. This was back in the 90s, and he also did a little bit of area where he used urea. Where he put urea, and this was under corn by the way, where he used the urea, it had very poor root structure and it never made a cob. In spite of the drought, where he put the rock dust, it had twice the root area, and even though they were only very small, it put little tiny cobs on there with a little bit of grain on them in spite of the harsh dry conditions. And that, so again, that highlights the job for me. That's the way it is.
I've just got one more thing to do. I just want to talk about this special book. Okay, here we go. One of the books that David sells. Now just tell us why that's special. And I actually knew about this book back in 2019 when I went round and interviewed the farmers for the documentary, and it was actually Martin Williams that
made you aware of it.
Aware of it, that's the word.
So, this book, Healthy Crops, there's a number of books which I like to read, and there's a lot of others that we also sell them to. I have them, and some of the guys are personal friends because they've proved their work. People like Neil Kinsey, Arden Anderson, Phil Wheeler, and that. I've had some interesting experiences with those people and some of the end results of what they've done. This book by Healthy Crops by Francis Sciboso is brilliant. Every chapter is about a chemical and what it does, and in some cases it even looks like you're winning, but by the end of the chapter it shows you're losing. And indeed, I just had a farmer guy from central Queensland who happened to be loaned a copy of this book from another guy, and he seen my name on it, rang up and got a copy. It's out of print today, but we're lucky that we have quite a number of copies at our disposal, so we have it available. And one of the things I love in this book is this particular page 103, and that it's a graph that is very simple to read. I don't like a lot of graphs, they're too damn hard to muck. You got to muck around looking up and down, but this one is simple, and it's about the use of atrazine versus dwarf mosaic virus in corn plants, and the recommended rate is 20 parts per million. But if you look at this book, 1 part per million atrazine caused 19% infestation, 5 parts caused 38% I think it is, infestation, and 10 parts per million, which is half the recommended rate, caused 94% infestation. And that is a prime example of the effect a chemical has on plants and on crops, because every time we put a chemical on a crop, be it an insecticide, a herbicide or a pesticide, we cause the cells in that plant to elongate and we open them up to more disease and insect attack. So, not good. The other one we should mention is that book Sarah's got. You got it with you? Ard's book, just grab it.
Ah, yes, I've heard that name a lot.
You can show the bricks thing too.
7 pages in this book that you'll never see in any other book like it.
Really?
This little book, Arden Anderson's first little book he ever wrote. And by the way, a bit of brief background on Arden. He grew up on a dairy farm in Michigan, left school, became an agronomist, and then turned around and became a medical doctor. I've been friends with the man for 23 years now, and that's not the skite either. But in this book, there's about Arden became a holistic medical doctor and works both sides of the fence. So as he says himself, he deals with both sides of the end result of what we produce as farmers food-wise and soil. But there is some pages in this book that you will never see in any other book. There's about 7 pages roughly on disease and insect attack in a range of crops, and those few pages are wonderful for teaching yourself to understand that this whole thing starts with minerals and then goes on from there, bearing in mind and not forgetting the biology, as I said earlier. But this is where it starts, and you will never see it laid out, not in any other book, leastways that I've ever seen or picked up, these 7 pages laid out like it. They're absolutely brilliant. And of course it's got about the bricks meter and all that in there as well, and various other things. Those two are 2 books that I love, but there is others. There's Hands-on Agronomy with Neil Kenzie, and there's The Biological Farmer with Gary Zimmer. You got The Non-Toxic Farming I mentioned earlier with Phil Wheeler. You got Eco Farm by Charles Walters, and that brilliant books. And then on the insect side of it, you got books like Tuning into Nature with Phil Callahan. They're books that should be read. There's also Paramagnetism with Phil Callahan on understanding the paramagnetism of the earth, and that people need to educate yourselves to understand all this, because there's a lot of bullshit out there today, but there is a lot of good information too if you choose to seek it out, and that's what I did. I spent a lifetime of experience and $300,000 to be where I'm at with this today. I may not know the answer to it all, indeed I don't, but as you've probably worked out here, I do stand strong on what I do know. Once it's correct, I don't care who thinks what anymore, because fact is fact and truth is truth.
Thank you so much. I just love your wisdom. I could sit here literally all day and listen to you. But thank you, David, for sitting in the back of the ute with me and
No problem.
selling me a book as well. I'm so excited.
Pleasure.